다 대신 과라고. 내치 말해. 저와대 제 밥에다 말씀받으면 메르바 줄시나 아스. 메르바 좀 쓰세나 아스인데. 진다 탑래시 가대 타바 유나. 와. 진다 진다 데려와.
Do it, Dylan.
야, 잘해 왜?
There's some questions that I neglected to pose earlier, and so the first one, I didn't do it in the order I got them. Please request Rinpoche to explain the quote on page 95 of the English and page 60 of the Tibetan. Also in the English reads, also in the treatises of knowledge, the teacher says that the 5 contaminated aggregates are suffering. They are suffering, its sources, the world, the basis of views, and also existence. Specifically, how are these 5 terms synonyms for the 5 contaminated aggregates? 아니 여기 디 tukchu. Shole tukchu. Shole tukchu.
tukchu에. 두줄라 가려오다. 지금이다 동아들에. 말해.
듬페 층은페 덴칠레. 레캉 니월렌페 퐁퐁아 둥얼 시송테. 샴라. 듬페 층은페 덴칠레. 레캉
층은페 덴칠레. 가도
니월렌페 퐁퐁아.
두줄을 왜? 두줄.
두줄라레. Right? 60? Yeah.
아니, 어디, 가방에 대화를 한자면 봐서, 가방에, 이 대리 가렸으라. 처음에 던질래자, 아니.
열렘페 퐁퐁아, 둥얼 시송테.
숭대세.
이 둥얼 콘종 직든당, 단에 시방대라기. 디, 열렘페 퐁퐁 민기 남당 간데스레사.
제 가르로 저는 간다사전 예len자 풍봉 대다 탑제장 간다사전 예len자 풍봉 대다 탑제자 풍보장 탑제 동아 군중 단에 시바스 주요하래是吧 간다사전 예len장 풍봉 대다 탑제장 동아 군중 직대당 단에 시바타 인시 사제전이 풍부되다 가있으나다 타 동아이 군중이 아니 타바다 제바이 아니 따위네 사제전이 아니 세바이 대체가나 사제민게 나는 투요하래 사제민게 나는 투 그거대요.
So I may have mistranslated this when I went over it. It says in the Tibetan here, the teacher has said that from the Abhidharma Shastra or the treatises on metaphysics, that the 5 contaminated aggregates are suffering, and so the 5 contaminated aggregates themselves are an instance of that which is contaminated. Suffering is an instance of that which is contaminated. The sources of suffering are an instance of that which is contaminated, the world, the basis of views, and here it says existence, but I'm not sure if that reading is correct. It might be craving or existence. Anyway, those are 6 terms which are used to indicate that which is contaminated.
오야 타바다 제와서야 돼. 아니 파츠 접어다 잡아라. 쓰고 접어다 자. 탑제해서 돼.
탑제. Together with contention, contention is also included within that, and things which give rise to arguments between people back and forth. So
공화 군중 직된 아니 따와기 미바 제가 따네 아니 세바 오두체는 세바체는 두시체 야.
So then 퐁퐁 녀름페 퐁퐁아 김민기 남랑 여러베스야 야 작체기 민기 남랑 레스
근데 위나라 소문도 디 처음에 단지는 여러분 퐁퐁 동아写送的是吧 동아서 이건 다 인도 처음에 동아 거서랑 동아 군중 직된 당 단에 세방 대다인 어디 숨거다
작체기
민기 남자리
퐁퐁
민기 남자리.
So I might have mistranslated that. So when I did that orally, these are not synonyms or actually terms that are employed interchangeably for to represent the 5 aggregates. Rather, these are names that subsume different aspects of things which are contaminated as a whole. Okay.
Yeah.
No. Then Shule Gyadang Shipju Sheni 142, Tibetan 142, English page 156. Okay.
자나 주주 가지.
Sheni. So here it says, the question is, regarding verse 135, page 142 of the Tibetan, English, page 156. Is the ignorance spoken of related to the misapprehension of the object of desire or aversion, or is it related to the misapprehension of the self, the person viewing the object? Regarding verse 135 and the 2 viewpoints that were presented, what are the implications of this debate and each of the 2 positions? Do they reflect different levels of coarseness or subtleness in their understanding? Does the congenial position, that's the way I translated the tepa, the thing that's acceptable within or the position that Rinpoche is saying is congenial, involve different modes of apprehension occurring simultaneously? Is this possible? There's a lot there embedded in that series of questions. Lula luang jishin tu timukon negute. Lula luang jishin timukon negute. Timuk di 그래서 작배 맥바야 양나 딱. How to translate this? Die 직제딜 timuk 여러분 timuk di di mikba 카레사
timuk mikba timuk sana 아니 디 마리바스고 와래 와 마리바스나 루데라 마리바스가 이제 간다시라서나 아니 덴진라 공부 와래 와 마리바스가 마리바스나 덴진라 공부 와래 덴진 인자 덴진 그미바 카레사라 강한 민에 덴바지야 그시是吧 강한 민에 덴바지야 그시 루데라 아니 미바 카레사나 간사기 덴진이나 미바 간사라면에 덴바지바 야 최이 단전이나 랑금이 풍부라면에 덴바지바 다 풍부 시 강한 민에야 덴바지야기 유대 미바들이.
So as far as the object, the observed object, which is the object of confusion here, this confusion is a type of ignorance, and specifically referring to the ignorance which misapprehends things as being real. So that ignorance, that type of confusion, can have any number of objects. So if it's an instance of the misapprehension of the self, then it takes as its observed object there the self or I, and then it misapprehends that as being real. If it's a case of misapprehension of a self of phenomena, other phenomena other than a person or a self or an I, then I'm sorry, let me redo that. So if it's an example of a misapprehension of the self of persons, then it takes the person as its object, and it misapprehends that as being, as having an intrinsically existing self, a self that is real, existing objectively from its own side without being, and autonomous in that way. If it, on the other hand, it's an example of a case of ignorance, which is misapprehending a self of phenomena, then it takes whatever other phenomena there are, everything else other than persons, and then it misapprehends that thing as if it was real. So it depends. It's the misapprehension as far as holding the thing to be real when it's not is the same, but these two types are differentiated according to whether the object which is observed is the person or some other phenomena apart from the person.
지당 말이 받대라 오마게 되지잖아 몽점지 말이 받지당 아니 치기로듯이 말이 받지니 와 몽점지 말이 받 라유라 몽배 나봐 주바 몽점지 말이 받지당 되냐 치기로듯이 말이 받지니 요아리 나 니루라 탄주루라이나 내 말이 봐라 아니 가려서 말이 봐셔와네 리바데 매바잖아 대략 시험받잖아 메주디 뒤에 간다 치지 말로 봐오 그래서 어때서 하는데 대리바데 매바잖아 미치지 아니 뒤에 간다를 주비 치지로 가지고 그래.
So now, when we're talking about ignorance, there's differences between the various schools of Buddhist philosophy. Within some of the lower schools of Buddhist philosophy, they would say that there are different types of ignorance, one of which is a simple confusion, which doesn't properly ascertain its object clearly, is just a confusion about the nature of the object. Then there's a kind of other forms of ignorance, which are an actual misapprehension of which misapprehends its object in a way which is contrary to the way it actually is, the opposite of the way it actually is, or in a perverse fashion, one can say. So now within this school, here when we're talking about ignorance, we're not talking about a simple absence of knowledge of something or a mere sort of general confusion about something. Rather, it refers to this second form of ignorance that the other schools posit, which is the actual contrary apprehension of the object apprehending the object in a way which is contrary to the way that the object actually exists.
Oh, yeah.
Shamla. Dena chakdang nike zindang la.
차단이 지단라.
Denzingi zindang.
차단이 그 진단은 denzingi 진단 제외 수시와 저어제 다 가서 쉬어 나시 차단이 좀 오르주에 denzi 요아래. 봐. 차단이 좀 오르주에 denzi 요아래. 스타디 가서 쉬어 임바. 가서 된다 충분된 바 춘대도 주고 자르면 주고 소환하시 전에 당에 이런 차단을 된지 셔바기 예수시 셔병에게 개와 순주당 요아래데 차단 경우 된지 여바 셔바디 아니 예스 인단 차단라 안에 가서 누바다 처음에 이제 그 남도 그 말이 유래 잡지 쳐와다 누비 남바지한테 차단이 기위 처음에 이제 그 남도 그 뭐봤던 말에 차자미 뭐 말했어. 뭐봤던 말했어. 와. 차단라 처음에 이제 그 남도 되게 장비 아니 그 장비 아니 가서 된진되니 아니 된진달라 차바당 대자당 아니 세단이가 요아랬어. 남도 뒤에 그 장비. 야나
This is hard.
차바당 당왔어 봐.
주민이 지킨 동동백
취미 이제 남도 되게 유라 유바당 메두베 남바 챤데
돈도.
차단이 기회 취미 이제 아니 미바를 때 말에 마도 차단이 미바때 뭐 말에 전에다 장원랑 정어 집 공부를 산을 됐어 아래 어고서 차단이 기회 주 취미 이제 남도 되게 미바때 뭐 인지 차단이 미는데 뭐 말에
Yeah. I'm sorry, this is something I have not got at the tip of my tongue. 작단 라 건다겐 디 양캬수는 이 서브싱이면도
그래서 누바다 미두베 남바제니 오디 남중 알아서 이거라 되자라 아니 사자징오 민네 이동의 남바제당 아니 제단라 이동 모의 남바제 전에 순거로 와 다지도 오하다 묘의 남바제니디 아니 차 되자기 계지 그 주춤이 이제 그 남도 대당 니 피미바당 나위 남바제인데 아니 이름 모의 남바제디 제단 계지 그 춤이 이제 그 남도 되게 미봤던 말을 마도 차단이 그 미봤던 말에스
작단이 김맥봤던 바
말에스라 차단이라 대 미바 고구 말 미바디 고구 말에스 가래스나 남도 대니기 장백이 아니 된전대라 된전대 아니 되자래 이동원은 티 장비대 되자래 아니 이동원은 남춤이 남도 티 장비 아니 된전대 아니 가래라서나 셰당래 와 셰당래 대라 가래라서 남도 이제 티기 누바다 미드베 남바jen지 수미 이제 티기 남도기 셀레데 차상와지 아니 로테니라 차 상여와 이다 테니 차단나 셰다레 차단나 셰단도 주의 차단도 주의 아니 된지 요아레 전에다 주세 거래 이자 대해라 차단이 그 된다나 된증이 된단 저위 수시와 차오 사대
네. 니 시주니 요르바 시주니 니
자 가와시 소시 시주면 요아레 가와시 주기 대자라 이용기 남 인자 된진도 주의 대자 요 말레스 남바카가레스
남바카가레
저기 담아 증거 찔레 이용기 남바제 이 사자용 올라면 이도 모아다 명 남바제 그레스
디 제바 칸스 요레 제피츠 진당 제피츠
제바지 요바다 지금 난디 요바다
So then the problem here is that
그 된진야이 대자야이
no
셰단이 대자야 들리디
디 테바 요라 디 시주 디 테바
어디디 타바이 스타일아
So here then there's two ways of interpreting. Did I give the no, I probably didn't even translate that. So thus in the commentary on that verse 135 towards the bottom or towards the middle of the bottom it says thus with respect to the way in which attraction and aversion they apprehend their object, the way in which they apprehend their object, one should understand that as being mixed together with the way in which the apprehension of things as being real apprehends its object, roughly. So the problem here is that if we take an instance of attraction and aversion, or in their sort of fully developed forms, desire and hatred, the sort of direct object of that, the observed object of desire and hatred, appears attractive to desire. The object appears as if it's attractive to desire, attraction, and in aversion, then the object appears unattractive, something that one wants to be separated from. And so the way that object of those two mental afflictions appears, now according to the explanation here, it's mixed together with the way in which the misapprehension of things as being real apprehends things. So as it were, There's an apprehension of things as being real. Based upon that, then comes about a thought which superimposes onto the object attractiveness or unattractiveness, depending on how it's judged to be. This judgment is formed, and that attractiveness or unattractiveness is then superimposed upon the object, which is neither attractive nor unattractive intrinsically, but this judgment puts that on it. And then out of that judgment, that thought, then arises actual full-blown desire or hatred. And so the question then is, how is the observed object of that desire and hatred, the mental affliction of desire or hatred, how is it observing, how is it apprehending its object? And here it's said that it's mixed together with the misapprehension of things as being real. So then there's two positions within this question. Some would say that it's that the full desire or hatred are not actual instances of apprehending things as being real. They're sort of engendered by misapprehending things as being real, but they themselves are not actual instances of apprehending things as being real. Whereas the other position, which is here Rinpoche is saying is more acceptable within the line of interpretation that he's following, is that they are actual instances of apprehending things as being real.
아니 가르사에 군중라 차라샤네 군중라 차라 동아대말 차라 타주다 군중 차라 자주 가라 가르사에서나 란자투비 자유지 짐바집이 짐배 참배 세바 군중라바 안내랑 찬이 주와 짐배 참배 세바데 군중 차바 라 장바 세바데 요zam라 잖아 니가를 요아래 라 란자투비 자유지 투비 짐배 참배 귀단하잖아. 아니 저거 말이다. 영원히가 있다. 참바서야 돼. 민남 숨바 참바 제가나. 란자 주비 저도 짐배 참비 세바. 네. 란자 주비 저도 주비 짐바야이 세바야이. 랑그 천이 주바 짐배 참비 세바데. 아니 랑그 천이 주비 짐바야이. 세바야 인바인자 텐데 세바데 랑가 천이 주어지베 전바 그 랑다 민남 충바 창바 인자 코라 군주 차라세야 주자르와 어디 직주고래 없어
So this likewise is explained in terms of the second of the Two Noble Truths, the origin of suffering. There are levels of grossness and subtlety within this second noble truth, the origin of suffering. Generally, the origin of suffering is craving, and so craving, we can talk about it as in two ways. There's sort of on a gross level, when we misapprehend something as being substantially existent, then out of that, as a self-sufficient substance, then out of that misapprehension, we can crave it. And so in that case, that craving is brought forth from that misapprehension of the thing as being a self-sufficient substance. And then likewise, on a subtler level, we can say that there's craving, which comes about from misapprehending things as being established by means of their own intrinsic identity. Now, in that case as well, the craving arises out of that misapprehension of things as being, in this case, established by means of their own intrinsic identity. And the craving arises out of that and is, and thus one can say that it's infused with it or colored by it. And but there's a differentiation there in terms of the subtlety and the grossness of the misapprehension that's underlying each case of craving. In the first case, the misapprehension is relatively gross because things being established as self-sufficient substances is a grosser level of misapprehension, whereas misapprehending things as existing by means of their own intrinsic identity is a subtler level of misapprehension.
that did that 가져단 가와. 인자 군대 다리가 가서 사자중 오라면 랑경 오유권에 요원도 dro도비 남바찬 아니 되살아 송바티 아니 단다디 된지디 주 되자디 아니 사자중 오라면 랑경 오유권에 요원도 dro도비 남바찬 인장 아 요원도 dro도비 남바찬 마이스 롱오유권에 요원도 dro도비 남바찬세데 다시 시원하신 차단 된다비 취미 이제 그 남도 그 제례 차상와데 대박이 아니 임바 대박 인상 아니 고요거나 이도 용어도 줘도배 나바체 어야
디규트 me no 디규트 me
그 가사 럽차이 바네 다 이슈야
I can't translate that. No,
야 다 잘이야 다 잘시
Next comes if we have all been each other's mother while circling in samsara during beginners' lives, this seems to imply that the number of sentient beings is finite, although an imaginably great number. Please comment. Dini Toma Mebane. Is that? I'm not sure where that was in the text, but it came out for sure. 토모메바네 란츠 파츠 마체스 제소 이 코로라
더 마치 치소서 처음에는 파치소에
So Rumche asked, well, weren't we our fathers also? Didn't we act as fathers too? Yes. Then he Dichena Simchin Drang Tibetan's not coming. Simchin Drangme Yomaresa.
심지어 참여 연말에
Yomare. Kaisina Patsu Machine Tomamebane Machine. Dini
심지어는 토마면에 쓰래 코알 토마면 봐지
Mare Kor Tomameba any Simchin Rere Patsu Machine Tomamemane Yore Drangme Yore
창이 말해봐
Drang Yomare.
랑기 껴와라 창에 봐이자 아니 심전들이 껴 많아 차와다 마제 차와지 매바데 심전들이 껴와랑 봐 인산 망아랑도 남주 마시고 고백하라 심전들은 마시고 고백하라다 준전대 사해
So then it says, this implies that the number of sentient beings is finite, although an unimaginably great number. I don't know why, but anyway. Yeah, maybe we'll not answer that. Yeah. This is easier, next one. Is the physical and mental bliss generated by development of shine, shamatha, in the continuum of an ordinary sentient being contaminated and in the nature of samsara? Shine, jiktenbe gomlamla shine zakche yorbees. Jiktenbe gomlamla shine.
직대비 고놈라
Shine.
신에 가르세
zakche yorbees.
직대비 고놈라
zakche dang donga yorbees.
직대비 고놈세 다 직대비 고놈세 돼 고전이 요아래 직대 싫어하는 남자 고놈세 직대비 고놈세 대토와라 신에 고그래
디 신이 크랑 디 신장 루승기 신장 디 대화 디 zakche yorbees.
대화 그 심바지 고그러 봐
레이네 대화 크랑 디 zakche
사제를 베세
zakche
사제를 사제를
It is. Yes, it is.
지당 사제라 주자 소소고 저당 망보 요아래디 단단다디 탄주비 로샤사 차이자가라 간디질에서 그래서나 사제 삼매세로 머리바다 뒤 과자 반응기 1년마다 많이 받다 된지 사제가 시험하다 삼매시험하다 두시작으로 봐
zakche 시작.
지당은 사제 삼매 조다 마음 주자서 이거는 류디라 머리베라루단 trawa 이시 사바메바 유지랑 신라 되는 마이노 세이가라 머리바다 뒤파자 가론 그 마야 비시와달라 사메지 시와당 아니 딜레 비시와달라 사제 시와.
So now there's multiple ways in the different systems of philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, to posit contaminated and uncontaminated things. But in this system, the only uncontaminated thing or uncontaminated thing would be an awareness which is not adulterated with ignorance or the imprints of ignorance. That's not adulterated with ignorance, roughly speaking. So, generally speaking, the mental and physical bliss arising out of shamatha, which out of that mental or physical pliability, flexibility, however one translates that, is contaminated unless it's part of an Arya's gnosis, which is understanding reality. No. Dinichik, could you please clarify again in this context what permanent and impermanent mean in relation to space, time, particles, cessation, etc.? Didn't takpa dang mi takpa di namka du durin kokpa takpa dang mi takpa kebar kariyures takpa dang mi takpa.
takpa dang mi takpa.
Yeah. That's the only place we really talked about it, isn't it? Yeah. Didn't takpadang mi takpa yorba. Di namka du dudin.
That the ceremony the dance shikshag orwa. Chidanda Kajima mitaba. Cheda Kajima may be shindiva taba. Tajil Saimba.
So now, in this chapter here, mostly what is being rejected is positions held by other schools. That is, for example, the Vaisheshikas who posit eternal atoms and things like that, or Vaibhashikas who posit substantially existent particles, that sort of thing, and time and so forth. But in general, we have to say, just generally speaking, something is impermanent if it's momentary, and that if it's not momentary, then it's permanent.
Oh yeah, that and that 대중 가능 아주 고알려서 내려와. 신단진단 탐라셔 타바카디 연안이 스테르베.
네.
알와.清당진단 탑 그나 예세데 다 같아 고디 저와도 봐도清朝마. 알와. 산전남 두전大把米送啊点没几。去对嘛前那年大过些送白南定去托巴去国把在住去人的不有的是的国把在是出吧按照去人谁的开始生了出家呀去人有在哪些前呢按你帮家家呀去人的不的有的天门那怕比点把送吧按你国单谁的点把送吧按你点把送吧고비 담바 숨바 시에숨바양 미르바 줄 시나 다지 칭화체 다지니 칭화 칭지 코르 칭제데 아니 가르 칭화지나 타라 시에세 그 코르 칭지그 두 군준 담바 레다니모니 어디체로 징바 동아 담바당 대 징바데 랭이 상황지 풍부 동아 담바당 동아 누군라 타바르 체베 탑 남데 레셴 타방 오르 주바지 연하니 대례신 안에 타방 오르 주바지 연하니 연하니 대편비 저부가시 적거나양 저부가시 적거나 대례 저부 지양 미제바 미제디 편바 중세장 중만 매바 되나 고바 제주 요아 말이스 고바 제주대 타바시 미제신 저바양 미르소
So then, as we were working through the earlier today, the other another school of Buddhist philosophy, Vaibhashikas, hold that that something like uncreated things are established as substantially established. They're not merely nominally existent. And so the verse here shows the reply to that. It says, if liberation, which is other than what binds, is bound, and the means existed, it should not be called liberation, since nothing is produced from it. Here it says, true sources or true origins bind one to samsara. True sufferings are that which is bound, and true paths are the means which liberate one from suffering and their origins, sources. If liberation, which is other than these, were a created phenomena, a functional thing, it should facilitate an effect, but it does not produce any effect, and not the slightest facilitation occurs. Thus, it is inappropriate to call such a supposedly substantially existent cessation liberation.
Oh yeah. 这他们没去接钱，对面给了他，我的当你明怎么的谁干了？俺那多半瞎子嘛，没给他人家个瞎子，没给大子。啊，单位区长、毛文区长、哪个党，两个来的话他看啥个协助把他改为，啊，俺呢，两个来的话他把他活过了哇，人家他把样在住嘛人吧，他把的。 아니 다점 다바점이봐 타바 다점 다바점시 캐나와 차이 타바 제주도 캐나와 미샤오
This is the view that is being posited by the Vaibhashikas would contradict what the teacher Lord Buddha said, and this is a quotation. Monks, these five are only names: past time, future time, space, nirvana, and the person. And so, that being so, one should not therefore accept liberation. One should therefore accept liberation as a mere, Ruth translated that as term, I would translate that as sign, a mere designation. She translates that as imputation, I'm translating it as designation, a mere designation, and not as substantially existent. So this passage shows that Lord Buddha said in this passage that things are merely established as they're conventionally designated. They only exist as they're established. They're only established as they're conventionally designated. They're mere names, mere signs, mere designations, but they don't exist substantially existent as substantially existent things.
Oh yeah, that did. Nyangala de is tunga maliba sepa, bangba sepa dang, gawani. 刚才能帮我下把汤搞完你，是他，两岸的了碰碰呢，有没有看啥什么人？看到两岸的就那马多天阳在看人是，你就告诉了，他专门的给多有告诉，看到我的马路把帮我，俺到我马路把杀我，杀把小完呢，碰碰更有帮吧，동아지 풍복군 빵바 시바 세바 대자단 저와 고바 양아를 대화오 시순비 어디다 시순비 가서를 룬딜라니 남바 탐제로 양아를 대위 인라 풍복 여바 만신 대라 때는 다위 가사장 아니 시바 코와바 마이 시바 민데 오 덴바마 왔다나 인류도 되봤다나 땜바 니가양 땜바 간도양 맞추비체로 야 됐다
So next comes an explanation that within the sphere of nirvana that all suffering is entirely gotten rid of, is entirely abandoned, and this an explanation of that. The idea of a substantially existent person or would contradict this explanation that within the sphere of nirvana, the suffering is entirely gotten rid of. And here this is in verse 221. In nirvana, there are no aggregates, and the person is not possible, doesn't exist. And that which is not, what nirvana is there for one who is not seen in nirvana? Yeah. So then the Lord Buddha has said, that which is suffering, all of that is completely abandoned, is exhaustively gotten rid of. And that's the beginning of a quotation from Sutra. And then from that forward, he continues by saying, the abandonment of all of the aggregates and the extinction of all craving, being separated from desire, cessation is nirvana. So because of that, this scriptural passage here, then in all ways within the sphere of nirvana, the aggregates are non-existent. And that being the case, the person, which is designated in dependence upon the aggregates, upon those aggregates, also does not exist, is impossible. And this would be the case for these people who are positing a substantially existent person or self, a person, because in the view of the realists, that's the way I'm going to translate Nurbo Dimparmawa, realists, people who posit the existence of real things, in their view, within nirvana, then the basis and that which is based upon it could not possibly be established.
Oh yeah, that is so. Oh, the mama was then never can't do much of a series. Then never true or can't do Numonda, and the language gave us Sebe, Yangalan Dever Chua, Pumbota Kazakaya, Matonwa terrorists. Pumbota, Dembatuna, then Dembatu, Kandu, Numonda gave us Sebata, Yangalan Dever Chua, Pumbota Kazakaya, Matonwa terrorists. And it Dembayan Dayan didn't do Kashi, Yoba Junsaja Mebes. Oh, 가서 땜바냐야 된루 강시지 중세제 매번 여번 매번 인상 안에 타바서야 돼. 내가 주바 매번 민게 다산도开랑고 그래.
So then here, so in the view of these realists, since the person in their view has to be substantially existent, then if it's merely dependently designated, it would be impossible for a person to exist at all in any way whatsoever within the sphere of nirvana. And because for them, then the basis, which is the person as well as that which is based upon it, nirvana couldn't be established in any way whatsoever if there's no substantially existent person. So then the rest of this passage says, I have to look at this again, sorry. Then 강사
대라 때는 따위 가사자 여기 되시라와 룬딜라 때는 니 넘버 탐제도 양알에 대비 인라 풍부여 봐 말했어. 와 양알에 대비 인라 풍부여 봐 말이시. 풍부를 때는 따위 가사야 쓰바 말했어. 와 오마와 덴바마와 따나 땐다 따바 간도야 맞추 쳇어. 양알에 대비 인수 때는 따바 간도야 맞추 쳇어. 와 되네 then Kandu, and Nimonda Jawa Sebe, Yangale Dever Chua. Then never Chua Kandu, Nimonda Jawa Sebe, Yangale Dever Chua, Pumboda, Kasakaya, Matoma teachers, then never Chua, Matoma terrorists. Or then never Chua Kandu, Nimonja, what Yangale Dever, Pumboda, Kasakaya, Matoma te, then by Yangdayang. 吧？南方人的顶住要康熙有就是讲没白，俺那他把这个的，俺那大把大什么都开了过来，
他不打他们，희랑 부르. Okay.
해제도다.
So from the position of the realists here, the basis for nirvana as well as nirvana itself couldn't be established in any way whatsoever. Here then it continues by saying that the basis, which is the, I'm sorry, I'm just totally lost it. I'm just going to read what she said. Neither the aggregates nor the person are seen as real, as a truly existent reliance, meaning something that depends upon something else, which reaches nirvana through the ending of mental afflictions and rebirth. What truly existent nirvana, reliant upon that, is there? Not the slightest. Thus, one should accept liberation too as a mere designation. One should accept liberation too as a mere designation.
So, oh yeah. 就是没把他把人大怎么看了我瞧我是，但你我限定那个让心，他把干巴啦是常见的单位，俺那写这个大写这个对位的，俺那他把大把干巴，写完预备女员对位，他把大把干巴，但是这把帮吧，他把这把我是哦。 那谈不得了，常见的代表写这个对位，他把大把干巴呢，适当查了，特别是学业原点继续学，先没把越把样少啊越把名单从谁干了，他常见给对吧啦？国家啦，两个人台湾呢，但没白，他把没白，人话没得，是广东下巴给的啦，但没白，他把没白给人话没得，那就为。 大写这个做去做堂，俺那旧他的都写完了，大写这个旧他的都写完了，俺那大写在哪个哪里全部来说啊，跨级别人把它乱呢，跨级别人把它乱呢，那么就他们家，俺那做了爬了下位车，那么就他们做了听你，俺那爬了西位车。 那些这个就我伢就来念完一张题材了，俺呢出于大学见呐，是他的嘛的，常见给他把做出的。
So next comes a rejection of the view of liberation, which is posited by other philosophers, which hold that there's some kind of a real self and real nature, that a self which has a real nature. And that's given on multiple subdivisions as well. So here, first is a rejection of permanent liberation, which is held, included within the consciousness or conscious being as it's imagined by the Samkhya school. And that's what first topic that comes in verse 222. Here the Samkhyas assert, according to us, there is no flaw that nirvana is not liberation because of lacking a reliance. When an adept or yogi, or here it says, yogi understands that the principle and the person are different. Here, principle is like nature, material nature of things, which generates all of the various phenomena that are perceived by the person. And the person are different. So when a yogi understands that it's called principle is a name a technical term that they use for all of the various manifold forms of things that evolve within the world, and the person are different. The process of involvement in samsara, such that the great one and so forth, stops. when everything subsides into the latent state of the principle, the conscious person remains alone. Thus, there is a liberated self.
Oh, yeah. That's your generous. You are Sabatan Tawala Tabi say. Shiru Jobo Yoba Kalamba Mirubata, Sikala, Satan Tala Tabi Chiri, she and then Chishu said the Israel. Oh, Kasa Mirubu Kalamba Mirubata, Le Shambi Tala, Jewisha chasing, Le Shambati Tala Chef, Jewisha chasing. Shiva Yuang, Jewish, and then what you make it up a Kalamba Chiri. You Korango all a duame, but Tabakala Bechetashi do them. Yaban Casore. Show your young, doing what you make it up a Calabachi. Troy Negam, show you about Calana, and then Jishi, Joseph Mevata, Shiriki, Yula, launch you to Calabacansis, Tinagaso. Launch at Namju Parashan and Mary. Namju and Dashi will get you, let's have a timber in town. Shiriki Jula, you consider it. Troy Negana, show you about Calana, and then Jishi, and then Jishi, Joseph Mevata, Shiriki Yula, launch you to Calabacansi. Launch at Namju Nam, and it consider Tapatovic, Dashi, Nam Palasavich, and Timna Meba in town. Non c'è non giù una palasana mevicer. City tabici che usciva io ba memba ne so sena ya te ba giuda.
So now then, the Samkhya's assert that. The reply to that is, when free from attachment at the time of liberation, what good is the existence of consciousness? It follows that it is illogical to accept the existence of a conscious person at the time of liberation when there is freedom from attachment to objects, because you assert that the intellect makes known to the person objects to which there is attraction. This is the reply to the Samkhyas here who hold that position. You also assert that it is the person's nature to be conscious and that this is permanent and immutable. What is the value of accepting the existence of consciousness during liberation? There is not the slightest value, because while accepting the conscious person as an experiencer of objects, the transformations which are experienced no longer exist, having subsided into a latent state. So then the question is then given from the opponent, what if the person remains without consciousness at liberation?
Oh yeah, that's it. Yes, Shiva may be true to you about Kalambalayan, and saw you about Mimbatang, saw you about Mimbata, Tsumwatas. And he Castle Meta Savatan, Juda, Shiva knew what the Champion Berashi to Kalambich.
So the answer that's given to that is in the second half of verse 222, where it says, also to exist without consciousness is clearly the same as not existing. It follows that to accept the existence of a liberated person without consciousness clearly amounts to accepting the person's non-existence, because of accepting that the person and consciousness are of a single nature, one nature, being neither equally existent nor non-existent. And then the translation drops a line which says, like heat and like fire and heat, the person and consciousness are, the Samkhyas, have already accepted that the person and consciousness have a nature which is completely equally of the same extent, the same quality.
Oh yeah, that's it. Then you Shiva Yubi, Nube Dubi, Taba Gaba Nis. Taba Daji Yubani, Taba Daji Yunani, Shiri Sabin Siba Yu. Temenani Sibala, Samba Yubaya Marinos. That Kadi, Troy Negala, and you, Sanjamo Korang Negala, and Troy Negala, and Shiri Shiva Majam. Usually, Nuba and a Dashi Kujiba Yedusena. Tam Miribata Taba Tambachi Yobani, Shiva Yubi Sabi Nuba Yobasina Yang, Dembata, 땡바 다 지여바니 시와 유비 니와 여바디 시바 연나양 대세 시와 매비칠 아니 니와 용식을 말해 시와 매비칠 가데 조이 다 매나 타바 매바 아니 타바 매바 코알라 미주바 주비칠 미주비칠이지 미드바 도마식도 주로잖아 야.
So then next they reply, the Samkhya's would come back and say, there is a self during liberation, for though there is no actual consciousness, the potential to be conscious of objects exists. The reply to that is that too is illogical, doesn't work. If at liberation a self existed, there could be a seed of consciousness. If at liberation a self existed, there could be a potential or seed of consciousness, but at that time there is no consciousness.
Oh yeah, 가서다. 이거 가려서. then 다요나 어때 주르세나 시와 예비 주바탕 뒤니바 내가 예비 괜찮지. 스발라 띄우는 주 무주 냠비 삼바 주 무주 냠비 삼바양 안에 삼바탕 타바여 봐마 인데셈. 멤버타스 땐 다시르 교회나 대타나양 조인 다데 매나 아니 대한 메고실.
So then the conclusion of that is, if the Samkhya comes back and says, if there's no liberated self, there is no liberation, and thus samsara is indestructible. Many such unwanted entailments would arise to you Buddhists. The reply that is given here is, without it, there is no speculation with regard to worldly existence. It is irrelevant to speculate whether, because there is consciousness, people would or would not enter liberation, or whether because its seed is real, people would or would not enter worldly existence. It would be relevant if a self as the reliance, the thing that relies, existed, but there is no liberated self.
어다더니 나지 세바 빵바 타바를 바니 동아래다 맨나무나 샹라여 봐 맨바네 대제나 바꾼나 군도다 세바레시 차와르 세가나 다니모 세바 빵베 관에 아니 얘네지 보고 말려봐 세바 빵베 그니 니모 세베 관에 저부 안에 사제 동아지 풍보 말려봐 세바 빵베 아니 동아라 탑이 민남라 세 동아래다 민남라 냥알에 대비 내가나 아니 가서 냥알에 대비 내가나 현래 때 풍보라 마덴바 냥알에 대비 내가 때 현래 때 풍보라 마덴바 주메베 다다바여 봐 민방 내위실 예 냥알에 대비 내가 때 현래 때 풍보라 마덴바 주메베 다다바여 봐 민방 내가 티칠 쓸까나 현라 여바 민방에 대실 쓰라 아니 가서 남도 되니지 주고 남 주부타 나바꾼도 아니 저 되니지 주고나 나바꾼도 아니 당신 나바탄제도 세바 빵바 리시 저발 차이 그와 메비 저위다开봐 미쳐보.
So the next verse, so all of that is a rejection of the Samkhya position and all the unacceptable consequences that would obtain by if following their notion of what the self is and what liberation is. But then here it says in verse 224, it is certain that those liberated from suffering have no other self. Therefore, the end of the self should always be affirmed as good. And it is certain that in the state of nirvana, people who have gained liberation from suffering by completely abandoning the contaminated aggregates through the total elimination of mental afflictions have no other causeless permanent self, meaning they don't have that kind of self, causeless or permanent self, which does not depend on the aggregates. Therefore, people who aspire to become free should always affirm that the complete ending forever of conceptions of a self is good and should never assert the existence of such a useless or you could say meaningless, purposeless, liberated self.
아니 가서 되게 칼랑 메자 오지 다 된루가봐 메대바 그 잡아텔라 된루가봐 메대바 그 잡아텔라 지덴바디 니라이 전담 남구 마인데 지덴바라 중사에 담비텐라 요 마인 다 가도 조위 내가나 조위 다 매신 대매비 냥대 민지 전라 냥대 민바스구나 대매비 민제 냥알렌 대와 냥알렌 대와양 대와양 두제나 나름 매신왜 아니 단지도 세바장도 마와 단지 세바장도 마와나 아니 가서 그래 텐더위 텐남 텐도예외 가서 그래 텐더위 텐남 텐도예외 지시 차대 나 레스 대배 지덴바 밀라 소와당 누구라 소와디开렘바 라이스开렘바 라이 전담 남바군도开랑와 차와 마인데 지덴바이 디니라이 전담 지덴바디 니라이 전담 남구 마인데
So next shows there's an argument that the opponent here would raise that from their position, the rejection of things being established as real is unacceptable to them. So they raise the following objection, or they make the following assertion. The conventional is preferable, but the ultimate never is. Ordinary people have some belief in this, but none in the ultimate. And so they would say as follows: if during liberation there is no liberated self, and nirvana, which is called the ultimate, termed the ultimate, is said to be the mere ending of conceptions of a self through the non-recurrence of that which is composite, what is the purpose for what is the purpose of striving for such an ultimate?
Oh yeah. 가서 그 전담 나바군도开랑와 차와 마인데 지덴발라 지시에 담비텐라 요마인 세가라 지덴발라开랑와 차와 교와다 메게베 레장 아니 침다 나라서와 준사 열라 군 타녀도开랑와 차와 대다 열라 전담비 텐라니开랑와 준사장 여바 마인비 실제 세도
So then they continue by saying, it's preferable for those interested in their own good to accept conventionalities, conventional things, like eyes, sprouts, and so forth, but not to assert any ultimate. For ordinary people have some belief in virtuous and non-virtuous actions, their homes, forests, and so forth, but none whatsoever in the ultimate.
Oh yeah, that did it. Chisu Jabandi Lu Ome, Da Jabra Kopi, Deji want to China, and Jawar Chabi, and Jawar Zibi Shundu Zebe, Rashu to Kalang or Mishavo.
So then Gyaltsabje explains that this stanza, this last verse 225, is a connection to the next extensive refutation of the self in the following chapter, and since it is interpreted as a controversial position within Chandrakirti's commentary, it should not be accepted as our own the position of the author. That's a misinterpretation of this verse.
Oh yeah. That did me what Chidana get you churnamni. Then yoba tala yoba de. Rangung oye dongba xie and tada umitana kawacha, say gana, and a chidan nangu oye dubi, and a tenjunam, Obama chinangu cho kadijini, in an attention to watch over churdam, and a rangi, Gujana debam, chaja to my duala dene yoba tala, and a yeba chama yeba. Yeba days. Oh, there's some now, Trasashua Nashi, any dinner yoba samla, Pension dinner yoba samla, Yeba Shapa Mazo, or Awangi, Rangung Wood Tribugi, any member in bed, 라왕고 오이 동바 셰찬네 아니 타라 오미람라 다자 그 타니다 저 오미탄라 아니 켜발 켜봐 샤고 그래
Then finally, Gyaltsab Jaya said there's a summary verse at the end where it says that all phenomena, internal and external dependently originated phenomena, are found existing merely contingently. That is, the internal and external things, which are all dependent originations, are found there. We find them, we know them strictly in a contingent fashion. So if something exists, it's a dependent origination. If something is a dependent origination, it is contingent. Things depend upon each other for their existence, and it's only in that contingent way that that they can be met with or found. And having understood that they're devoid of their own character or intrinsic character, they're devoid of autonomy. Things exist contingently in relation to each other, but they don't have an intrinsic character or autonomous character. They're devoid of that. Having understood that, one should make oneself well educated in the meaning of the middle way, which is free from the extremes of eternalism or annihilationism, those two extremes.
야, 난 이거 누구 주시자고 누구 찬다고 주시 줘봐라. 난지 집에 난지 줘봐 시접에는 제가 와서 이 오다고 공부 시험 때 받으라지. rabji cheba kuwi cheba wo chen. Da rabji chuwa tela. O dinu kaba la nga yubi na ne. Ani tambo da kaba tang. Tu kaba yigan da tambo da kaba tela. Liu xiong xaba da liu chen den ba. Da tambo liu xiong xaba tela da so kaba tang. Ani kaza je. 질 가봐 담에라 채빈이 없어. 다 담보 다 소소 가봐 되라 야 시예배 나네. 담보 체랍이 다 가봐라 니 나고 오 가봐다 두지 가봐. 되라 양 나고 오 가봐라 뭐다 뒤량 가봐 니 가봐다. 현지다라 면은 오냐베 어제를 봐 타와 전에 다 숨이 예배 나네. 뭐다 뒤말아. 뭐다 가세다 간제 내다 표면미 김이 많이 봐. 대지 미심 바시래 쳐다 포냐도 셈 포냐도 셈 가든 다 제자와 가시 랑공 오연나 사랑전지 주용 오연나 냥알렌 대위 뒤나야 아니 테마토에 체배 집이 체래 양자도 비트나야 테마도 왜 체배 집이 체래 지된번 등이 라이写소 주어 신나양 안 나랑 건 오해 봐 마인데 다른 건 오해 봐 마인데 대연아 깨밤 표면은 많이 식도 주나 나연아 깨밤 표면 많이 식도 주나 개미리 비치를 간제 나다 표면이 김이 많이 봐. 야, 대신세로 과일에서다. 여봐 많이데 제나 깨워다 표면 많이 시도 주나 태미를 비치로. 야.
So next, that concludes then the chapter 9 or 9th exposition, which is negating especially permanent things. And then the title of the chapter and the title of the sub-commentaries, the title of the chapter, the title of the sub-commentaries chapter follows that. And then this leads into the next exposition or 10th chapter, which is a negation, showing a negation in specific cases of things being established as real, things being real. And first comes the negation of a self. Then there's a negation of a time being real, established as real, and so forth. So the first of those, the negation of the self, has
two parts: the explanation of the body of the chapter, then the exposition of the title of the chapter. Multiple subdivisions of the first of these. First is the rejection or negation of specific instances of the self or ideas about the self. And within that, there's 4 subdivisions. The rejection of the notion of self, which is held by the Vaisheshika school. There's the rejection of a self as it's imagined by the Samkhyas. The rejection or negation of the self as it's imagined by the Vedantins, and then other rejections of the qualities of the self and so forth. So the first one of these is the rejection of the self as it's posited by the Vaisheshikas. That has the rejection of the basic character of the self, a negation of that. And then the first of these has multiple subdivisions as well. So here comes, first is the actual exposition of that. And so this is given in verse 1, verse 226. And here then there's an introduction to that. If the so-called self existed by means of its own character, that's the way I'm translating Rangingurdupa Swarupa, by its own character, it should be seen in the state of nirvana. Fearing its discontinuation because it is not seen during nirvana, they say the conventional is worldly things are preferable. That which the worldly things are preferable, as it was given in the previous verse, and so forth in that verse 225. However, the self does not exist by way of its own character, for if it did, it should be male, female, or neuter, but that is incorrect. It would not work. The verse that illustrates this is, when the inner self is not female, male, or neuter, it is only out of ignorance that you think yourself male. And so, mutikchin, mirikbichu, mo, tare. Maningshik Juna Marikpichu.
Mudijanam Danisu Karen, Miribichir Serva, Tayana Joda Pima Manishi, Junayan Tem Miribichir Ser. Daragon won you about my Indi, Tuyina and a Joa Pima, that Manisho to Juna Tem Miribichir. Ani Mudijanam Dala Ni Kalende, Nagadada Chi Das. Nagadadi Luju Kona Nation. 왕소 암비초나 유라 주바 쳐바데 아니 난게 집이 주 완전히 유리 주와들이 상가다 치나데 간데레선 이완이 류다 암부 뒤용 오젠 난게 다라 판도 바오시 류다 암부 난게 판도 바오 셰세도 다테니 난게 다当我你也不明白，然心基础也不明白，是吧？或者下边你就可能按比说有了就把前边难给大的，我你也不明白他，那我你就原来太大了，那刚才平面讲，那叫我先都平面看到就去那，那去那错了没比吃，那。平面的说话，那个平面的说话，大概原来图样没被切的是，但让咱就注意要把伊那，那叫我前头样平面可能就那错了就，错了就话没被去平面的说话，大概原来都没被切的是，天呐，那个前边就我你就把没是，那个前边就我你一听，我你就把明白他是，看个是那个大。那个大的平面明星，叫样没啦，是见面满意，看在南大平面明，见面满意呗，是的，看个是那个大平面明星，叫样没啦，满意样明白提些，你没些吧，都没把些来，去。大国让都老百姓他这了，那住子嘛那些人是前那个大让些用我要把怎么的，那他这了住子嘛那些人是
So now here, this non-Buddhist, Ruth has translated this as forders, but I'm going to just use the Sanskrit word for that, tirthakas. There's no really good translation into English for this, so to learn this term, which subsumes basically all of the non-Buddhist philosophers into one category, and non-Buddhist religious traditions in India. The tirthakas assert two selves, an inner self and an outer self. The first is inside the body, and this inner agent, which makes the various sense organs engage with objects, is the focus of the conception I. The second, the outer self, is the combination of the body and the sense organs, which assists the first, assists the inner self. And then the response to that is, it follows that the inner self does not exist by way of its own intrinsic character. If it did, a woman should in future lives also only ever be a woman, yet change is observed. Femaleness and so forth are not also attributes of the self. Thus, it follows that the inner person who is an agent, or she says agential person, a person that functions as an agent, does not exist by way of its own character, intrinsic character. For when the inner self is neither female, male, or neuter, it is just out of some ignorant confusion that you imagine yourself to be male. Here one could translate that is like if somebody thinks I am male, they think I am male. That's just nothing but confusion, given the position that's articulated here by these non-Buddhist tirthakas. It says here, it's like when we superimpose a snake upon a rope. It's in the Tibetan says when we superimpose our apprehension of a snake onto a rope.
Oh yeah. Tobi du shiki tu lamba tu de khondo soma me jan jawa ju sera ta toba mo tezumji ani du shiki ani tu lamba de ani tu de khondo se de khondo soma me nya ani tu de lamba gi dane ani jawa ju ba.
The sutra passage illustrates this. So someone who thinks that they've eaten poison, and they so somebody who imagines that they've eaten poison, even though they haven't, the poison hasn't entered into their stomach, but they just out of the belief in that, they faint, they pass out.
Oh yeah, that did it. La, Tilan Gabatella. Tilan Gabatella, say, dark and walk about that. More than Tilan Gabat, you benana, Tilan Gabatella. Can't you what Tamjella? Pomo money, you remember. Teddy did Tedani, then a pomo money means. That gave what I'm premier Sony, any rangi, a pomo ambo you make. Any cheat and daggy die, right? In the Joda permission, the cheat daggy die in la. Tedan Jeva la, le Nangita Jewadan, Jewaso, Tedan Jeva, Nangita Jewaso, Chi Junachimbo, Chi, any such a munola so Junwa Shubo, she, Jewa Soja, that to Tabata. Tedana or Demba Tabata, no Demba Trubala. 치다나고 오 내루케 케랑 친자라 깨워서서 줄 문주당 고시안 칸라라 라마레바 인자 아니 깨워서서 줄 문주비 케바 메바 중화 탐지 기부를 주나 중화 탐지 기부 주나 강게제 중화 탐지라 부모 많이 여바면 바 티체 강제 중화 탐지라 포모 많이 예민배 강거제 중화 탄제라 포모 많이 예방 바티세 제데 치 단위지 중화 대다 니라 때네 아니 오 가서래 나기 다 포모 많이 임바 미래대 중화 치다 중화 대다라 때네 나기 다 포모 많이 임바 미래대 대다나 아기 내가라 라와 대다나 누누불라 소베 까나야 아니 깨워서 이바 타로
So then here the opponent replies to this. Male gender, female gender, and so forth are, it says, marks of the outer self. This actually is referring to like the marks here. It refers to the genitalia that indicates gender. So, but anyway, male gender, female gender, and so forth are the marks, signs of the outer self. Though through its connection with this inner self through its connection with this, the inner self is male, and so forth. Reply to that: it follows that because of their connection with the outer self, the four great external elements, earth, water, fire, wind, and so forth, earth, water, fire, and wind, would also be a male self, and so forth. If that were so, all the elements would be a person, since for real functional things, there can be no differences between what is and is not, male and so forth. And then the verse here says, when all the elements are not male, female, or neuter, how is that which depends upon them male, female, or neuter? When all the elements do not have male, female, or neuter gender, how can the inner self, which relies upon the outer self, those elements, feasibly be male, female, or neuter? It cannot. If all the elements were male, female, or neuter, it would follow that even during the early stages of the fetus, in the womb, maleness and so forth should be observable.
오야 여바면 바티체 지디치 단위 중화 대단이라 때는 난게다 포모 많이 임바 미리데 대단아 누누불라 소요 감네 아기 내가 나양 에께와 내가 나야 깨와 바 타로 철라야냐와 대다 타로 타원 주로 셴나 아주 오다 냐와 대다 타오 저래 코자라 라시메발라 아니 콘도 셰브냐와 자다 조금 아래서 코자 라시메발라 때네 나는 도베스 로아 다 생각에 풍부할 때는 다 라시메발라 때는 도베 콘도 셰브냐와 자다 메
So then they object to this, and they say the same error is entailed for you. But here the reply to that is, since we designate gender in dependence upon the elements which are devoid of intrinsic nature, that fault doesn't apply to us.
Oh yeah,
We'll stop there for now.
Om benza bumi wanchen swashi Om benza reke ahum jari korwe ikapori ra
O Zambuleno
balanche
Zandramine Liba Mayavadangayashe and then Donam Jodo Dramin and Dramin Dajimboshi Pasam Jeshi and the Jeshi Mami Baye Lado Rimboche Nobo Rimboche Zemo Lambo Rimboche Lambo Rimboche Tajo Amabi Rimboche Terjembaye Bamba Gema Drama Loma Medoma Gema Mazama Jijama Nyema Rimboche Do Jolanama
Susulatami Belger Punsum
Chowa ma samba me ba sa ji yi do wang wa de da pen jen sa wa da ji.
Bar Pe Pelden Lama Lampanam Ke Bar Du Yang Yong Ki Ke Wei Shen Yen Jen Mo Sung Mei Jang Se Chu Je Lo Sang Ken Sen Zhang Ane Tek Ba Chempo Sung Ju Sab Mo Lek Bar To Be Kachin Han Rocky Yundu Shingam Boa Gio Kedru She Suso Shenik Yang Dachi Boa Magyar Nam Kataran Yambe Sanjan Tam Jela Sewa Chempo Kone Jela Tu So Sashi Pagi Jetsun Lame Rapen
Guru Rana Mendrana Kone
Jangchu Samcho Rinpoche
Ma Je Bana Je Joji Jewa Nyamba Me Baya Kone Gondo Pewa Sho Doni Dawa Rinpoche Ma Je Bana Je Joji Jewa Nyamba Me Baya Kone Gondo Pewa Sho.
The mind of enlightenment is supreme and most precious. Where it has not arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen without any decline, may it only grow stronger and stronger. The view of emptiness is supreme and most precious. Where it has not arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen without any decline, may it only grow stronger and stronger. Song Dong Sin Bei
Yinong Zhui So Ni Xie Dan Zhu Sa Mo
Ji Shen Du
Si Xin Song Zhe La Me De Ba Zhu Ten Gu Du Ba Jin Ye
Ge Lek Zol
Dan Be So Zhen Ben Zhu Chu
Den
Ye Be Ge Kan Ru Chui Ji Xian
Wa
Lo San Ge Wa Yu Ba Jie
Ba
La Jian De Men Ba Tu Be Qin Ye
Op
Rang Xian De Ni Lin Jie Zhu Ba Ye Gu Xie Da Ni Ni Men Yan Yi
Dan
Ya Jie Be La Si Be Guo Zhen Pa Zu Me Jie Zhen La Ma So Wa
Dip
Xie Dan Zhu Luo Qi Jie Liu Ba Ye ja den xin du nian ma ju lung du tamang je su xin je ma ye den den zi qian bu niu zhen chu dong chu de ba ba ga wei ne te dan san ba ba ta sun zi ji da ji na ba nam ba sha ba ye zhen den xin niu dan ba niu zhen chu jie dan ji ni lo wa me ba da jie ba zhong den da zhu ru wa tang le gan so da ma ge tin le ye men pe de